Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
Hi, and welcome to How to Be Better at Feedback. Let's talk about why you're here. Giving and receiving feedback is hard and frustrating, and it can be scary, right? And it's one of the quickest ways to level up, both for you and your team. Feedback is a skill most of us are expected to have, yet few of us have ever been trained on how to do it effectively. My name is Emily Ray, and I'm the creator of a framework called the RISE model. RISE is an acronym that stands for Reflect, Inquire, Suggest, and Elevate. It's a tool for structuring and nurturing meaningful conversations. The RISE model is rooted in psychology and learning theory to help facilitate feedback in a way that feels safe and productive. Using a shared process like the RISE model helps to manage the expectations of everyone who's engaging in these critical conversations. And it helps to develop a positive culture around the giving and the receiving of feedback. So in this training, you'll learn more about the fears surrounding feedback and how to use the RISE model to mitigate them. With practice, you'll build confidence in your abilities, you'll recognize the value of your own unique perspective, and maybe even appreciate how meaningful feedback is essential to personal and professional development. One quick note before we begin. The title of this training is How to Be Better at Feedback, not how to be good at feedback or even great. A word like good is a qualifier that implies a destination or an end state, as if there's nowhere else to go once you've arrived at good. Better is a stride, not a state. Better is an incremental process. It's a journey, and one that acknowledges an individual starting point and celebrates each step along the way, no matter how small. So if you're ready to begin, let's see what better means for you.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
Okay, so here's a common misconception about feedback. Most people approach it like any other conversation, assuming that if they know how to communicate, then they know how to give and receive feedback. But that's not true. Feedback, it's a skill, and just like other skills, feedback requires training and practice in order to do it effectively. Without training, it's like trying to tango without ever learning the steps. You risk looking foolish and stepping on some toes. Ouch. You yourself have likely experienced the deep and sometimes lasting cuts caused by a quick or careless word in a feedback exchange. Most of us have. So if you're a little hesitant about feedback in general, you're not alone. One of the greatest barriers to productive conversations about how to meaningfully improve personally or professionally is this fear of feedback. It's common and often stems from not knowing what to say or how to say it, or worse, saying the wrong thing and hurting someone's feelings. What if there were a way to acknowledge and address these questions in order to make feedback feel less intimidating? That's what the RISE model was designed to do, to teach you those steps necessary to engage in the dance of feedback with ease and grace.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
Let's take a few minutes to look at how the RISE model helps to structure and facilitate a meaningful feedback interaction. RISE breaks down feedback into 4 steps: reflect, inquire, suggest, and elevate. Each step in this process is designed to move the conversation beyond compliments and criticism to encourage feedback with more weight and dimension. Think about the difference between clicking a like button on social media versus actually composing a well-thought-out comment, explaining exactly what you liked about that post. The latter requires deeper engagement with both the subject matter and the author. If you've had limited experience with feedback, or you're just scared of it, the structure of the RISE model gives you support as you're building your confidence and as you're building the ability to engage in these conversations. The RISE model also establishes boundaries and rules of engagement for feedback. The shared framework manages the expectations and anxieties of everyone involved. So if you're at a loss for what to say, The sentence stems from the RISE model take out the guesswork and help to coach you on how to articulate your thoughts. By using the shared process, everyone is aware of each step, and this allows you to anticipate, maybe even appreciate, the questions, the suggestions, the ideas that surface. In this way, the RISE model gives permission not to make or take the feedback process personally. With continued practice, you will start to internalize the model and the steps. You'll become less dependent on the sentence stems, and you'll start to feel confident forming your own organic responses. Eventually, the structure and the stems of the RISE model become invisible. Learning to tango is initially awkward and heavily dependent on breaking down each individual step. But with practice and getting a feel for the process, once you trust your ability, eventually you relax into each movement and maybe even begin to experiment with your own style. So goes the dance of feedback with RISE. As you become empowered with new confidence, you begin to recognize the value of your voice and the value of your feedback. In this way, RISE helps to create a culture where everyone is capable and willing to engage in the dance.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
Let's unpack each step of the RISE model. Charles Duhigg, author of Smarter, Faster, Better, says that the first step in any cognitive activity is usually the hardest. So the whole goal is just to make that first step easier. That's exactly what the RISE model is designed to do because, make no mistake, feedback is a cognitive activity. It requires thinking. So the first, easiest step in giving meaningful feedback with the RISE model is to reflect. To reflect means to recall, ponder, communicate. Reflection can be as simple as sharing what you remembered or what stood out to you. This step often includes evaluative comments such as "I like" or "I appreciate." These kinds of comments are more meaningful when you can elaborate on them with a "because." "I like what you did because of X, Y, or Z." This "because" can root the comment in something other than your own opinion or personal preferences. For example, after "because," you could restate the goal, the assignment instructions, or company policies. "I like what you did because it creatively meets the assignment instructions," or "I appreciate your take because you clearly adhered to the recent HR mandate." After reflecting, we move on to inquiry. To inquire means to seek more information or to inspire ideas through questioning. It's important to stay open and curious here. Your goal in this step is to understand the approach, what was done, why it was done that way, and for what purpose. So at the inquire step, you're prompted to ask thought-provoking questions that might lead to a new perception, or to ask clarifying questions to help develop a deeper understanding of the issue, opportunity, or goal. I find the inquire level is a great place to make sure you're on the same page with the person receiving your feedback. Here, you can ask clarifying questions, including what kind of feedback they're hoping for, or if they actually want feedback at all. The third step of the RISE model is to suggest. Many of us, this is our default setting when it comes to feedback. To suggest is to offer ideas for improvement, but be careful here. There's a subtle difference between offering a suggestion and telling someone what they should do. And finally, we've made it to the fourth and final step of the RISE model, elevate. To elevate is to raise or to lift something up to a higher position. When it comes to feedback, this means imagining the potential of the project or the situation beyond stated objectives. And it means sharing ideas for future iterations of the work. When you elevate something in a feedback interaction, you become forward-thinking as you imagine not only what is, but what could be. If this feels like a lot to remember, don't worry. The RISE model provides sentence stems that walk you through the process, and after a little practice, you'll find that the RISE model is really quite simple. But practice, you must. Just like any other skill, it's only when you begin applying the information in a relevant context that you start to internalize the process and really make it your own.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
Okay, so now let's clarify what feedback is and what it isn't. This may seem like a simple concept, but it's an important one. In fact, many of the issues that arise within feedback interactions result from a lack of clarity around what's expected within that exchange. Oftentimes, feedback gets confused with needs around approval, affirmation, appreciation, or advice. Approval is wanting to know that you're done. Affirmation is wanting to know that you've done something right. Appreciation is wanting to know that you've done a good job. Advice is wanting to know someone's opinion. None of these things are feedback. Can you think of a time when you've asked for feedback, but what you really wanted was approval or affirmation? Most of us have at least one example that we can muster up. These misunderstandings can be hurtful, and they continue to complicate our relationship with feedback. So it's important that before we start giving each other feedback, we get really clear on what feedback actually is. In their scholarly article, The Power of Feedback, John Hattie and Helen Temperley define feedback as information provided by an agent regarding one's performance or understanding. In this training, we want to build off their definition of what feedback is by adding insight into the how. In her book, Radical Candor, author Kim Scott warns that feedback is measured at the listener's ear, not at the speaker's mouth. So what does this mean for us? It means that if our feedback doesn't move the conversation in a positive, productive direction in terms of getting the receiver closer to their goal, then it likely won't inspire purposeful action, which is the point of feedback in the first place, right? So as we move forward, let's define meaningful feedback as information articulated and delivered in a way that inspires purposeful action. You may be thinking this is a high bar for feedback. It is. We hold ourselves to this high standard because we know that meaningful feedback is essential to achieving our goals.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da.
So I want to tell you a story because our attempt to make sense of life and our place in it is easier when there's a relatable context. New information can be interesting, but new information that can be readily applied is empowering. So once upon a time, a few years back, I was getting my master's in instructional design. I felt incredibly passionate about the program and was on fire for what I was learning. One of my most memorable and transformative experiences with feedback happened during this time. I was designing an interactive learning module and was excited to show the finished project to my roommate, who was in nursing school, a totally unrelated field. So, what do you think? I asked. She carefully reviewed my work and considered her response. "I don't know what you want me to say," was all she could muster. Ouch. Say something. Say anything, I thought. But now, over 10 years later, I look back on that experience with a lot of gratitude because it was the cornerstone of my work with the RISE model. But in the moment, I was hurt, and I quietly resigned myself to never, ever show her my work again. Has this ever happened to you? In hindsight, I can see that I didn't really want feedback. I was just excited to share something I was proud of, and I wasn't affirmed in the way that I had hoped. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, so the interaction left me feeling rejected and embarrassed. The work that I shared with my roommate was important to me, and it was part of my evolving identity. It was personal. What I learned is that it can be difficult to detach ourselves from any criticism we receive on our work, whether that be in terms of performance or contribution. We have a tendency to see any critique as an attack on who we are, our identity, rather than constructive commentary on something we've done. When this happens, we let the feeling of feedback overshadow its function. It's important to remember that the feeling of feedback does not have to be negative. With the right training, feedback, even when you've missed the mark, can be reframed as positive and productive when it helps you reach your goals. Looking back, if I were to reframe that moment with my roommate using the RISE model, I would approach it in a totally different way. Reflect. First, I would tell her the objective of the assignment, and then I would show her what I created. I would acknowledge that she wasn't studying the same thing as I was, and ask her what stood out to her as someone without any specialized knowledge. Inquire. Next, I would ask her if she needed any clarification about what she just reviewed. I would also ask her something specific, something I still had a question about. Suggest. Next, I would ask her if she had any strategies or ideas to help me achieve the assignment objective based on her unique perspective as a student and as someone who knows my skill set. Elevate. Lastly, I would ask what interactive learning modules look like in her world, the medical industry, and then I would see if she could suggest anything that she enjoyed or that worked really well for her. They say that hindsight is 20/20. But what this means is that we can learn from our experiences and apply that insight moving forward. One surefire way to get better at feedback is to intentionally break down these past experiences to more fully appreciate our relationship with feedback and the opportunities we have to shift from a feelings-driven moment to more function-focused exchange.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da. Hey! Ba-da-ba-ba-da. Hey! Dum-ba-da-dum-ba-da-dum-ba-da-dum-ba-da-da.